Hey skiers, it's Bob with skiessentials.com.
And I'm Matt. How's it going?
Matt and I are here today with a new ski from Nordica. That is the Unleashed 120. I have this year's graphic 114 Unleashed over here, just to provide a little bit of context for where they're going with this new 120. And I feel like we've been talking about 100 millimeter kind of free ride all mountain skis for months now. So I thought it would be fun to change it up and go wide and kind of go a little bit unique with this new 120. We kind of saw this thing kind of popping up in social media and stuff like that. People, Nordica athletes and whatnot, are starting to hook into this Unleashed 120 in bigger mountains, wider open spaces, and for the most part, we don't really have that luxury here in Vermont, and we can kind of talk about kind of some restrictions that we felt with this ski here at Stowe. Certainly has more of kind of a homegrown feel in bigger mountains, wider spaces, higher speeds, and certainly we can talk to that when it comes to performance. But since you spent more time on this than the rest of us, we're kind of formatting this video in a similar fashion where we'll talk about shape and construction, and then I have my hard-hitting questions over here for Matt, so I hope you're ready for that.
Always.
Good. But just general impressions, you know, how'd you feel getting on this thing first and foremost?
Kind of scared. Not gonna lie. I mean, it's a 120 underfoot ski. It's a 190. Has metal in it. It's a spooky ski when you hear it on paper.
Yeah.
But then as you get used to it, after a couple of runs, you get to know it more, and then you take those things and use it to your advantage. And really enjoyed this thing.
Yeah.
I think it has a special place in the market, and I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy it.
Yeah, and just to kind of recap, Unleashed, you know, this is the widest 120, 114 here. We go 108, 98, and then a new 98 CA, as well as more of an entry-level Unleashed 90 on the narrow end. And once you get to 114, you start to see a lighter construction, lighter weight wood core. So that's kind of a good time to transition to the construction if you want to hand me one of those here. Very similar to this 114, where we have their lighter performance wood core. So this 114 is actually a little bit lighter than the narrower 108 because that 108 does use the normal performance wood core. So lighter core in 114 and now into 120. They still use their single sheet of terrain specific metal in this one. But pretty solid construction. You mentioned it's not casual.
No,
it's
not
not
at
a
all.
casual ski, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's just more mass and volume here, making this thing very stable and very powerful. We didn't weigh this ski singularly, but I weighed a demo binding and then subtracted and came up with about 2,100 grams, putting it a little bit heavier than this 114 here and the 186, like 2,080 here. So just a little bit heavier in the 114. You know, they can certainly play with the thickness of the core as to where more weight goes. But it's sturdy, but it's not overly heavy. I was just writing an article on a Black Crow's Anima,
Yep.
which is upwards of 2,400 grams at 115 underfoot. So if you think about a ski like that is just considerably heavier without being wider, it just kind of shows that there is a little bit of effort to make this somewhat lighter and more mobile.
For sure.
But certainly feels different on your feet. We had also mentioned, you'd mentioned this is a 190. It really only comes in two lengths, 180 and 190. So that's an interesting split. also kind of highlighting that this is a unique ski and isn't going to be for everyone. If you don't fit into a 180 or a 190, then
Look elsewhere.
yeah, there's something else.
It's interesting that you say that about the Anima because that's heavier. This is damper.
Yeah,
And yes, there's metal in it, but it's just interesting. Like
Yeah.
a few 100 grams difference, and this is smoother and more damp for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
and then from a flex perspective, it's kind of progressive. You know, I would say it's a little bit softer in the tips and in the tails than underfoot, and that's kind of by design and adding to, you know, make it at least somewhat playful out there. It's not, you know, a full-on rocket ship, although it can certainly do that. But yeah, similar constructions to these 114s, and then the shape is where it gets, you know, a little bit different. So we were just talking about kind of the four main differences that we found, that these skis are flatter, they are straighter, they're wider, and what was the fourth one?
More rocker.
More rocker.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a good time for you to jump in on the shape and the profile here.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we do get a 22.3 meter radius in the 190, and you do have 150 millimeters up front for all of that flotation. And you certainly feel all of it. Those tips really do want to plane up and keep you up on top. But I mean, if you want to compare the camber here and the splay, like there's a pretty significant difference between these two, and they do feel very different on snow. It does feel like there's a little bit less splay in these.
Yeah.
Like I do feel like those they do plane out a little bit more, but tons of rocker in the tip, and then more similar to the Unleashed 114 in the tails here, just a little bit less splay. But the big difference we have here is more taper in the tail.
Yeah.
More of a pin tail, more pointy, and that certainly translates into a more maneuverable and easier to release tail, especially in deeper snow. But yeah, I would say in the tips here, this taper has made a very big difference. Those really pull you across the fall line, whereas these just kind of want to slice through. But yeah, overall, things are ridiculous. Just it does take a little bit to get used to it, especially when you go into it thinking that it's an Unleashed, because it is a departure from what you're used to. But very welcome to the changes here.
Yeah, these 114s, you know, from a twin tip perspective, or at least Unleashed in general up until the 120, that they're very much based on a twin tip format, and even a more traditional one. If we think about like the 98 and the 108, we've always talked about how those are incredibly good turning skis.
Oh my God.
And this one is too. I never really brought out the 114 on non-powder days, but it does still have those same, you know, more desire to go across the fall line.
Yep.
You know, the 108 is an uncommonly good carver for its width, and these kind of follow suit. It definitely departs once we get to 120. We kind of get out of twin tip world and more into a free ride twin, I guess.
Fall line bulldozer.
Yeah, we're just not dealing with as much of that influence. This 114 is clearly simply a wider 98.
Right.
You know, they're using that template to make this more free ride oriented twin, and then we just move more into, yeah, like you said, big mountain bulldozer with this 120.
Totally.
So pretty interesting to see the differences, you know, especially in terms of the shape and that flatter profile, because these are more cambered. Any of these narrower Unleashed are more cambered, and that makes it a little bit more difficult and hooky in deeper snow.
Yeah, and I always found the 108 and the 114 to have a softer tail than this one does.
Yeah.
So you can't really ride the tails as well. Like these, you really have to drive the tip and use the support underfoot and in the tail to really hold your speed and keep your stability. Whereas those, their maneuverability comes from the softer tail. The maneuverability from these comes from a game of unweighting the ski and the more taper.
Yeah, I mean, performance-wise, it makes sense. You know, you spent more time on them. I skied them at our ski test, which was a couple of days of really, really amazing spring conditions. So I never got powder, but I got deep corn,
Yep.
which we always kind of think is a close second, or as close as a second can be to deep snow.
Sure.
And I remember taking a run with my wife, and we just kind of went up the 6-pack and down an intermediate trail, and I left her in the dust.
Yeah.
And we get to the bottom, and she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I can't help it.
Right.
They just go. And I remember also following you on these and not being able to keep up, and it doesn't really matter what the other person is on. These are just, they're very fast.
Yeah.
And they like to go fast, and they perform better at speed.
Totally. Yeah.
And
As
that-
speed increases,
Yeah.
it just gets better and better.
Yeah, and
Yep.
that's kind of part of my hard-hitting questions here that we can get to. I kind of split them up a little bit differently into, instead of doing our normal on-piste, off-piste strategy, I'm going by speed. So
Sweet.
I'm going slow, medium, fast, and then we have some comps.
Totally makes sense for this ski.
Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. Slow speed. How much, and I also feel like this is a ski that's made for a strong skier who's pretty aggressive, which is you.
You definitely have
Yeah.
to have some strength. I'm glad that you mentioned that because it requires a lot of skier input to get out of it what it can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So slow speed here, Matt. How much effort in percentage are you using when we're in tighter areas like bypass woods, ski pole alley, diving board, etc.? So technical, smaller stuff that you can't just mob through at high speed like here in Vermont.
At first, I would say close to around 50%.
Yeah.
But then once you understand that it's, as I mentioned, it's a game of unweighting where you can find something to take some of the weight off of the ski to flick it sideways, then it becomes easier and it comes down more like 25%.
Okay.
But in terms of raw power, it's 50 to 40% is just straight from the legs, muscling this thing around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because those are tight spaces.
totally.
You can't let it run. You have to do more manipulation of the ski and your effort.
It's hard to ski these reactively.
Yeah.
You need to ski them proactively
Okay.
and be kind of thinking about 1 or 2 turns ahead so then you can weight it and properly kind of prepare for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How playful is this ski on a scale of 1 to Bent Chetler 120 when it comes to side of trail skiing and kind of searching for side hits and natural jumps? So, deliberate, playful skiing when wide open powder is not available. I'm putting that Bent Chetler 120 as the most playful in this range.
Sure.
So 1 being the least and Bent Chetler being the tops. Where would you put this on the playful scale?
I want to say 4, but that's pretty generous because I think that they're opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So, 3,
Okay.
that's also kind of
Yeah.
being friendly. Yeah, I'll go 3 because it could be less playful.
I remember following you down North Slope, I think on our Top 5 Fridays thing, and that's what you were doing, was side of the trail, kind of, surfing where the snow kind of rose up, and it looked like a lot of effort.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It was. I was exhausted because I think I skied these 2nd or 3rd that day.
Yeah.
And it was so warm and wet and soggy. And
Yeah.
I was already tired. And then these just kind of put me under
Yeah.
for sure.
Let's move on to medium speed here. When it comes to crud and chop, so drier snow basically on moderate terrain like Gondolier, Perry Merrill, Lord Sunrise North Slope, does this ski feel like too much, not enough, or just right?
Too much, but it depends on what you're doing. When you're on like Hayride and Gondolier, it's great. You have so much more room to let it
Yeah.
run. But when the trail gets narrower and it gets a little bit more moderately pitched, that's when it's just like, this is too much.
Yeah.
This is too much. I'd rather be on that.
Yeah.
Something a little bit more hooky, more engaging, more dynamic. But as soon as you get into more open terrain, then you're happy to have it. Because then that's what it wants to do. That's what it's made to do. And then it makes total sense in your head. Oh, yeah, this is
Yeah.
great. I think in your article you said, and you're playing the percentages sometimes with a ski like this. And when you nail it, It's pretty special.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it worth having for a handful of skiers. And if people don't know, we have a lot of really naturally turning trails here on our home mountain, like old school hand cut, twisting, turning, that allows you to ski with the fall line. And I think that that's where these are fun. If you kind of picture an open area and then your artistic run down, that's kind of what Lord to North Slope is here.
Totally.
Just with trees guiding your way. So you are
Right.
restricted, but it still seems to work okay.
Totally. Yeah, 100%.
Can you see an advanced skier who's shopping for a dedicated powder ski ending up happy here? And I'm putting that in medium speed because I feel like that's where an advanced, not expert skier spends most of their time.
Sure.
So dedicated powder, you field calls from people all the time they're like, I want to round out my quiver. I want a dedicated powder ski. Is this something that would make it to the top of that recommendation list?
If they wanted something extremely damp and extremely stable.
Yeah.
Like we hear all the time the word chatter,
Yeah.
and people don't like it. I get it. That's what you're looking at when you're going down the hill. But if they don't want chatter or any of that, I would say this is probably going to be close to the top of the list.
Yeah.
Do I think it's the best option that they're going to have the most fun on? No. But I could see an advanced skier who wants something extremely stable, extremely damp, and are willing to put in the effort and be okay with it, then I would say sure. But I do think that something like, that Ben Shetler 120, they would get a lot more benefits out of something like that than this.
Side question, do you think that 120 is too wide for that person, for a dedicated powder ski?
I do, yeah.
You think is it more specialized?
I think so, yeah. I think that the 114 would be better applicable to someone like that, or even the 108.
Yeah.
Like that thing, both of those would have more versatility because that advanced skier is probably not getting heli dropped on top of an Alaskan spine.
Yeah.
They're probably going to Jackson Hole or somewhere out in Colorado where this is a little bit more appropriate in the resort for someone like that. Although that's another caveat to this is you don't have to take this uphill with you.
Right.
If you're touring. If you are that person, you're taking the lift, so you're saving your legs. So yes, short answer, yes, but there's some caveats to that.
For length, you're clearly a 190, as am I. Do you wish there were more options? And if there was a longer option, would you go longer? I feel like 180 is a weird length for even people. I don't know. It almost seems on the short side for something so wide.
Yeah.
Would you go longer if they had a 195, 198?
Can I say I don't know?
Yeah, you can say that.
I don't know because I've only skied it here and it felt more than enough.
Yeah.
But, if I was out in Alaska, I've never skied out there, or somewhere where it's just everything is so much bigger.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And I've never, the longest length I think I've been on is a 192. Period. So I'm not sure. I don't think so though.
Do you think that there's room for a shorter ski in this build and shape?
I don't think so, because if you're that height and you need something in that range, then you're fine with a 114. You don't need all of this float because you are proportionally you have it in the 114.
Yeah.
So I don't think so.
There are some a Blizzard Spur or I think we have K2 Crescendos that are super wide powder skis and they come in really short lengths.
Yep, that's true.
They look funny.
They do.
But that's it's a powder ski for smaller skiers, and that's fine.
Totally.
But yeah, I don't know. I always find it interesting when big skis come in such limited sizes.
Right.
So, just a thought. All right, high speed, Matt.
Okay.
what's our best bet here at Stowe to harness the character of the ski here? So, terrain-wise, what do we have? So you can kind of, I would say anywhere here in the eastern United States where we're limited in width.
Sure.
You had mentioned hayride.
Hayride for sure, but like the lower pitches where it gets really steep.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a tough one. Some of the upper mountain, like might be a little bit tough at some more technical lines like the Hourglass where you pretty much you're going straight through
Right.
it.
Really technical.
Yeah, Profanity up there. Again, like it's rarely ever blows in enough where you're going to need something like this, and like the choke point in it is pretty tight. I would say everywhere if you're strong enough, but for the most fun, I would say like lift line because of its pitch, hayride because of how open it is, gondolier for how open it is and how consistent it is. That would probably be my assessment, those types of things.
Out of all the places that you've skied in the world, if you could teleport anywhere with this ski, where would it be and why? You can't make stuff up. It has to be somewhere you've been.
Don't think I would do Chamonix just because they don't really get crazy powder days where you need a 120.
Yeah.
I would say Tahoe, Whistler on an amazing day, and then like Snowbird on a really good day.
So big
mountains.
Big areas.
Yeah, big areas.
Yeah.
Lots of open space, not a lot of trees, that sort of thing.
Yeah. We saw a lot of footage from like Jackson Hole, and I've never been there.
Same. But that would be my first answer.
It seems like that would be kind of a normal first choice for a lot of professional and big mountain skiers.
For sure. Or somewhere like BC.
Yeah.
You know, if you're doing snowmobile skiing.
Yeah.
And like just getting dropped off and doing those sorts of things, that would be pretty sweet too.
Did you have as much fun going fast in spring conditions as I did?
Yeah, okay. No doubt. Pretty much you point it at a mogul and it explodes when you go through it. It's crazy.
No, I loved it. I thought that the spring performance of that was off the charts. And, you go from skiing something like, I don't know, a Black Crow's Atris or something like that to an Unleashed 120. And it's just it's a different sport.
Yeah.
Like I found it just to be a different playing field.
Totally.
Really crazy.
It sits alone in that sort of performance category. It just, as I said before, just bulldozes. It's nuts. Nuts. Yeah.
Let's do some comparisons here.
Okay.
A happy accident, and you can grab it if you want. The Vocal Revolt 121 just happens to be there for some of our ski test filming. And I think that's a pretty good one to talk about. Has some heft, has some drama in the rocker and taper. I think that thing's a little bit more, I don't know, freestyle and creative inspired. What do you think?
Way more drifty, a lot more smeary and playful, very twin tippy.
Yeah.
This is the exaggeration of all the things that they put into this ski.
Yeah.
The departure from that. This is like one stepping stone away, and this is like 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had mentioned the Bent Chetler 120. I think that's another good one.
Yeah.
I would say more like a lighter Revolt, and then considerably, like we were saying, more dramatic in nature than Unleashed 120.
Yeah.
And I liked what you said about recommending that advanced skier who's looking for a dedicated powder ski to look more in that Bent Chetler 120 region.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Bent 120 has a little bit more of a traditional flair in terms of shaping.
Yeah.
This is pretty drama filled.
Yeah, it's out there.
Everything's exaggerated, whereas that Bent is a little bit more tame. But then I think I know the next one that you're going to bring up.
Okay. Tell me what it is, and I'll tell you if you're right.
Sender Free 118.
Yeah, Rossignol Sender Free 118.
Yeah. If you like the sound of this, but want it in a twin tip, a pure twin tip, that's the way to go. and then if you want some more dampness and sturdiness.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be my closest comparison, I think.
A little bit narrower, Armada ARV 116. So again, kind of that smooth, woody feel. Maybe not as powerful.
Is it the White Walker or the ARV
No,
112?
Gosh, I can't remember now.
It's a 112.
Yeah, 116 is the one I was thinking of. The White
White Walker. That one is far softer in the tips and tails, but pretty sturdy underneath. It then has more of a Revolt 121 flair too, in terms of the taper shape. It feels like a surfboard, whereas this just feels like a mega yacht.
Yeah,
it just goes.
We had talked about this one earlier as well. Black Crow's Anima, a little bit narrower at 115, but a similar like power structure.
Totally.
I would say. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. That one has more. It's more dynamic, has more rebound, more energy, more zest, but doesn't have necessarily the same plow potential as the Unleashed. Also has a bit more driftiness to it, just that more symmetrical rocker shape.
Yeah.
It's not symmetrical, but more
symmetrical. More symmetry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that one, more surfy, more smeary, and more powerful than the bent.
Yeah.
So if we're
All
slotting
right.
them in.
So we got your Revolt 121, your Unleashed 120, Bent Shetler 120, Sender Free 118, Anima ARV 116. We're going to put you on top of your teleport thing here. So let's say Whistler, 2 feet, top of the mountain. Which one of you would you rather?
Anima and this,
Yeah.
I think. The Sender Free would be a bit too heavy. I would want more maneuverability and flickability than that thing. But I would want more charginess than that Bent 120. And then also want a little bit more of an aggressive shaping, this being aggressive.
Yeah. And that being more playful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if that was my dream line, I would want it to be like that. I would also add a Maverick 115 CTI.
Yeah, sure.
I would add that into the mix as well. I think that would also suit that like range of skis. This Anima, Maverick 115. I think those are my style of ski and how I would want to ski the mountain. Directional, maybe with the 360 or 2, and then jump off something big.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I got for my hard-hitting questions, Matt. You did a great job withstanding the pressure. But yeah, I think that it's fun to get away from the normal stuff, the 100 millimeter underfoot skis and kind of the normal all mountain stuff, and look to something that's a little bit more wild and a little bit more unique. And I think that also it's fair to say that it's taking Unleashed in a slightly different direction. Be interesting to see how that ski influences other skis moving forward in Nordica's line. And I think that, you kind of hooked into that as a nice soft snow option, albeit a little bit more work than normal here in Vermont.
Yep. I'm going to Uno reverse card you.
Okay.
Same question that you asked me last. What are you picking?
I would take that Revolt 121.
Okay.
I like how that
really
thing
surfy.
is. Yeah, that's how I like my deep snow powder skiing blank canvas, is kind of a more tapered and bouncy thing, because I like those the DPS skis with a shorter turn radius as well. So having something with a lot of drama in the rocker and taper, but still with a supportive weight, I think would be my choice there.
Sweet. Awesome.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, of course.
Speaking of asking, please reach out if you have any questions about this new Unleashed 120, where it fits in with the line, and where or how it could help you become an extremely accomplished deep snow powder skier. It's pretty sweet, and we had some good times on it this year.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm just going to flip this over because I think this is in the running for
Best base graphic.
Best base graphic along with all of Solomon's skis.
Yeah, well, Matt, thanks for joining. Please reach out if you all have any questions about these new skis, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye.